He talks a good game. He talks a good game. On the outside, he talks a good game.
Hello, welcome to On the Outside. Hope you're all well. So this sporting digest for this Thursday lunchtime. Got about half an hour free, so I thought I'd come on and do a live show for you. So really, yeah, if you're in the chat, let us know your thoughts on any sporting activity, whether it's football, whether it's your favourite team, my favourite team, whatever it is. But really, this show is all about boxing. Predominantly, but not necessarily in boxing in terms of the sport, but in terms of the business today. Right, so if you follow boxing, you'll know what's been going on. Obviously, there's been lots of news in the last week or so that from Matchroom Boxing stable, Conor Benn has up sticks and gone over to this Zuffa Boxing, which I think is a ridiculous name anyway. Zuffa Boxing, that is headed by Dana White, or the face of it is by Dana White of US UFC fame, of course. It's all owned by TKO Boxing, TKO, who are like a $40 billion business or something. But in terms of Zuffa Boxing, that is majority owned by Seller, which is the Saudi owned, and the head of that is Turki Al-Sheikh and Dr. Rahman, right? So when Saudi Arabia started to get into boxing about 3 or 4 years ago, everybody kind of got blindsided by the money that they were going to throw into it. And they did throw into it. And we are having these amazing Riyadh season fight cards. And many observers, and myself included, said, but hold on a minute, look, just bear this in mind, that the main reason they're throwing all this money into this sport is not necessarily for the sport itself. It is to bring eyes to Saudi Arabia. It is a big PR, big tourism grab. That's all it was, right? Excuse me, I got a bit of a cold. So the whole point here is that they were drawing eyes to Saudi Arabia, and they were bringing the boxing events to Saudi Arabia. And then last year, in 2024, last year as well, they thought, okay, well, maybe we'll have one or two events outside. So they had one in the United States, they had one or two in the UK. But it was always thought to be in Saudi Arabia. Lots of money was thrown in. They courted all the promoters, Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, others from the United States. They all got them together. They were all friendly again, or not again. For the first time, they were friendly. They're all working with each other. Golden Boy Promotions came on board eventually. So it almost seemed too good to be true. And I was saying at the time, this is too good to be true, because at some point they don't need the promoters. They're just going to buy everybody out and do it for themselves, or they're just going to drop everything, and move on to something else. Well, effectively, that's what they've done. They wanted to test the water, learn about the business in a kind of systematic, ruthless way, see who the players were, see how much value their money could, or how much influence their money could have, see who they could get into their pocket, which they've pretty much got everyone in their pocket from the business side. He said, right, okay, now we're going to do everything for ourselves. Who's the best person that we know in the global sense who's basically already done this in another sport, another combat sport? Well, that's Dana White. Dana White took the UFC from nothing. They gobbled up or took over all the other MMA organizations, and they built UFC to be essentially a monopoly. They own the fighters. The fighters can only own them. They pay them a relative pittance for what they fight. It's either their way or the highway. They, ruthless. They don't care about the fighters at all, or seemingly they don't care about it. If you fight, you fight. So it's a totally different model. It's a totally different way of treating fighters, and also how much the fighters are being paid. So Turki Al-Sheikh with Saudi Arabia, Seller, they want to throw, right, okay, we're going to go to them, Dana White, and see if we can create something, their own boxing league, whatever. So they've created this Zuffa Boxing, right? Big market share. They got a TV deal on it with Paramount as well. And they're starting to put on some shows in Las Vegas at the Apex. And it's very small shows. less than a few hundred people there, 1,000 people max, I think it is. But they've had hardly anybody go there, right? They've been underwhelming, to say the least. However, they've been making big moves in terms of selling marquee names. Jaya Patek from Matchroom. Now they've signed Conor Benn coming over for fight deals. But the point here was that Turkey Al-Sheikh, the Saudi Arabia, when they started getting more vocal about boxing, first of all, it was, this is all Turkey Al-Sheikh's wish list. These are my wet dreams of boxing matchups. Sorry, boxing matchups, right? This is what I want to see. This is what I've always wanted to see. Tyson Fury in there. Oh, this would be amazing. The hardest men on the planet. Oh, get those together. I want to see AJ in there. All this sort of stuff, right? Usyk, get in there. And basically what he wanted to do, he wanted Tyson Fury to beat Usyk, and he wanted AJ to beat whoever he wanted to beat. I can't remember who he was going to fight at the time. And then them two have that big smash. Well, obviously Usyk beat Tyson Fury. Dubois beat AJ, so all of a sudden he couldn't have that wet dream of fight. Didn't happen. At the same time, he wanted to do his own thing, do away with the bouts, just the Ring Magazine, because they bought the Ring Magazine as well. So you can see it's systematically buying everything up. So what happens there? Apologies for the cold once again. So what happened then? Get Zuffa Boxing, and it's supposed to produce their own league, and it's going to be, on the face of it, right, we don't care about any of the bouts. They mean nothing. We can have our own organisation, a la UFC. They've called it Zuffa Boxing. Stupid name, but they've called it that. And this is all we're going to get fighters coming into us, and they're going to fight for this bout. And it'll be the Ring Magazine bout, and essentially that's it, right? So they were going to do away with all these bouts. But they've realised that doesn't work. Because the other competitions are still there, and there's so much heritage and involvement in those. So now they've got themselves in a bit of a sticky situation, because they're making a bit of a fool of themselves, in my opinion. Because you've gone in and say, no, we're gonna, you're gonna have these fighters just fighting for us. This is gonna be the only way, just like the UFC. Now they're paying millions and millions for fighters just to fight for one fight deals or two fight deals or whatever it is. But they also allow them to fight for their Zufa belt, their world title belt, which is just another bout. They've just created another bout. That's all it is, right? But they've got a lot of money behind them. They've got a lot of influence, but it's just another bout. So it doesn't mean anything, right? But they're also allowing these fighters, like say Jaya Patek and Conor Benn, to say, oh no, well, you go off and fight for the IBF, the WBC. So you've already backtracked on whatever it is. So all in effect you've done, you're not taking over the boxing system. You've just created another bout. You're trying to get fighters into you. Many are not coming. Certainly the high level ones are not coming voluntarily to fight under your system, your low paid system. So guess what? We're going to have to pay a lot more money just to get these marquee names in so we can have these big fights. So we're using these fighters. They're using these fighters not because they believe in them, but they're using these big names, trying to get as many as they can to fight under the Zufa banner, which builds up the name as Zufa. Okay, you could say, well, that's good business sense, right? But in terms of a business model, it's not going to work, right? It's not going to work. The only way it's working is because Saudi Arabia are going to throw millions and millions at it. They'll pay for it. This is all Turkey Al-Sheikh, Seller, Dr. Rahman. They're all doing this. Now, what at the same time is that the relationships they built up with Matchroom, with Queensberry, with anybody else, they're cutting those business ties now. Have you noticed you're not having really Riyadh season fight cards anymore? Have you noticed that Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, they're not really having these big Riyadh season fight cards in heaven? It was supposed to be lots more. We're supposed to have 4 or 5 a year. Not happening. You wonder why that? Okay, because so it's all gone over to Zuffa Boxing. Zuffa Boxing now all of a sudden said, well, we don't need Eddie Hearns, we don't need Frank Warren, we don't need Top Rank, we don't need, anybody else, PBL. We don't need any of these Golden Boy. We don't need them. because we're just doing it ourselves. The problem is they've thrown their rod out there, or they've thrown their net out there to catch everything, and everybody's like, get off, don't need me, get off, don't involve us anymore. They'll want the money, but they don't want to be involved with this. And the nature of somebody like Dana White, and also the nature of Turki Al-Sheikh, you say he's just as ruthless in terms of his mindset, but he's probably a lot more calm than Dana White. Dana White is not exactly the nicest person. Certainly doesn't come across as the nicest, caring person. But then again, you could argue, well, he doesn't have to be, because he's in business, right? Look at the way he's treated, the likes of Ngannou. I don't know what there could be 6-1, half a dozen the other there, right? What about Tom Aspinall? More so. One of the things that he said about Tom Aspinall. And you take the likes of Conor Benn, right, who's been nurtured, who's been taken care of by Matchroom, and many, many other fighters who have been taken care of by promoters. Now, yes, it's a business, right? And people say, well, boxing is a terrible business. Yes, it can be, but also you got to think, well, there's investment from one side and the other. And if there's no market there, or this fighter is losing his fights, then you can't just keep on promoting somebody who's going to keep on losing, right? Or doesn't have the big pull. So a promoter's always going to try and promote the best fighters and the best fights, and try and make money for themselves. They're not going to be flogging a dead horse and trying to promote somebody who's just not promotable, right? So that makes sense. You could say, well, the promoters don't follow the boxers. Yeah, but the boxers also consistently got to do it. If you're a successful boxer and you're winning world titles and you're a big name and you're a big character, because this has been the big thing about boxers over the last few years and combat fighters. So you've got to come with a personality. You've got to build your own personality. The likes of UFC, Conor McGregor, that's why he was the biggest one in the world, because of his personality, right? And his his fighting skills, of course. But it's his personality that brought him to the fore. Tyson Fury, he's the big personality, brings him to the fore. Conor Benn, big personality. He's never won anything, but he's in terms of titles, but he's that big personality. They've built him up. They've cared about they went to the nth degree to try and protect him of those drug failures, which he did fail, but they were never really explained. So all of a sudden now, you think you're going to ditch all that heritage, ditch that protection, ditch all that promotion, ditch all that system, and you're going to go over to, you're going to put all your eggs in the basket of Zuffa Boxing under Dana White, who couldn't give two monkeys about you, right? Under Turki Al-Sheikh, who couldn't give two monkeys about you. You are the sacrificial lamb to the slaughter. Dana White was talking about this the other day, saying, "Oh, I'm dealing with babies." He's not only talking about promoters; he's talking about boxers. They're all babies. They're coming over here. This is my word of warning, right? Because I saw this a long time ago in terms of Saudi Arabia and everything. That you think that they're giving you all this money, but there's a reason for it. There was an end game for this. They were going to come out and do something in their own way. And they were going to get rid of these promoters. And it was always about promoting Saudi Arabia. That's fine. But also you got to talk about sports washing here and everything like that, because all their problems they got in their own country. But people were willing to ignore that because it was just sport. And you thought it was wholesome interest in the sport. It isn't wholesome interest in the sport. There's a reason for it. It's no surprise to me that the likes of Tyson Fury was a bit pissed off after he lost those two fights to Usyk, because he kind of thought, hold on, I'm being shafted here, being shafted by the likes of Turki Al-Sheikh, who seemed to have moved on. And I'm not sure if that's true, but I got that impression. Lots of other fights. It's no surprise that we're not seeing the Riyadh season fight cards right now. Whether they return, who knows what's going to happen. We're not really seeing, the Eddie Hearns, the Frank Warrens, they're going to keep on going and producing their own cards and things like that. And whether they do them in some association with Riyadh season and everything like that. But in terms of those big events that we are having, they seem to have dried up for now. Zuffa Boxing are going to take these fighters, and all they're using these fighters for, yeah, we're going to pay you 15 million, and you're just using your name, using your presence to build up our profile. They're using you. And guess what? If Conor Benn, if they put in somebody, with their mindset, we don't care who you're going to fight. You're going to fight him, and you're going to win. And if you don't win, that's it. You're out. We're going to pay you 15 million or whatever it is, but for this time, guess what? We're not paying you that again, especially if you don't win. Now you could argue, okay, well that's it. They got to, fighters have got to back themselves and they got to win. He's so lucky, Conor Benn, that he's even got this opportunity. But mark my words, that they are systematically trying to take over, and they are stopping the opportunity. If you think about the opportunity of fighters, right? I'm all for one global organization, one world champion, right? But I also acknowledge that the different world titles, different bouts, you are a world champion at this level, at this bout, and it gives people, boxers, fighters, so many different more opportunities, so many more different fight pathways. So it energizes the system. It energizes the way to do business and get fights on. If you've only ever got one champion, that one champion can only fight maximum 2 or 3 times a year. And the longevity of that champion, that longevity of your boxing stars, which is important to get people involved in your business, to care about the fighters, to follow them as fans, you need them to stay in the business. You need them to stay fighting. Now, the UFC is slightly different, but it's ruthless. So they're not going to stay there for long. And the same with boxing as well. But now you've got the massive problem that you've gone against everything that you said you were going to do. You weren't going to have anything to do with the bouts. You weren't going to have anything with big stars. You weren't going to pay this money. And now you're already paying it. Now the UFC fighters say, well, hold on a minute. Why are you paying all those guys the money? Well, we were going in there and just ripping ourselves to pieces in this system. It's easy for Dana White to say, look, if you don't like it, that's the system you're in. You're under contract, and that's what it is. We're not paying you anymore. If you don't like it, off you go. You're not going to be able to fight for anybody else until you've fulfilled your contractual agreements with us. So it's good. It's easy for them. So watch out for all the boxers going over to Zuffa Boxing to say, okay, think about what you're going to do, because once you own the monopoly, once you're within that system, to come out of it and have that freedom. Guess what? You talk about, restrictions. There's going to be a lot of restrictions there. They might think that they're going to take over, and their attitude is they're taking over, they're dealing with babies and everything like that. But the boxing public can see through that. I think they've picked the wrong person to try and steal from Matchroom Boxing in Conor Benn, because it might work in the United States. So Zuffa Boxing might work in terms of a model in the United States, but it doesn't work, in my opinion, in terms of global presence, taking over the sport. The only way that you can have a global takeover of boxing is in terms of a global organization, right? It has to be something global, because they are now just another promotion. They are just another bout. So, they're thinking they're going to take over and they're going to take market share so everybody goes away. But they're still going to be there. And some people are still going to. So if you can't get involved with Zufa, right, then you're just going to keep on going with the other ones. Now, this is the same as UFC did. The Zufa might say, okay, we're going to buy up the IBF, buy up WBC. But that's the only way it would work. That's the only way this is going to go anywhere. I can't see it going anywhere at all, really. I've never been a fan per se of Conor Benn in terms of his attitude or in terms of what's happened, of course. But there's a certain tenacity about him that kind of makes him appealing, right? But at the same time, he's done this and done it in a certain way. It's not that he's gone over there. It's just the manner in which he's done it. And you kind of think, I hope you get chinned. I hope you get chinned. And you hope that, somebody comes along and makes the whole Zuffa Boxing thing fall on its ass, makes the whole Turkey Shake fall on its ass. And you think, well, because the way you're going about it is just assuming that you can throw loads of money and everybody's going to flock to you and everybody's going to lie down and let you get on with it. And all you're managing to do right now is piss a load of people off in the industry. You're producing a product that actually is boring as hell. I've seen 3 fight cards. Was it 3 fight cards from Zufa? Really crap production, crap fights, crap everything. It's just been pretty poor, really. Okay, a couple of fights have been pretty good, but that's it. But overall, rubbish. When you compare that to boxing events, you think, especially decent boxing events. Now, I appreciate that's just starting small. So right now, they're almost like small hall boxing. It's very low-level boxing. Okay, now they've got to build up their stable. I get it. And they got the money to do it. So in a year's time, it might look something completely different. But it depends how many going over. Now, let's say they got big news coming. We'll have to wait and see. But this is a systematic taking over, or their attempt to take over. I just don't believe that it's a good process. And I certainly don't believe that what they've done so far is a good product. I think it's been pretty crap so far. And, if you take the likes of Dana White, you compare the likes of attitude of Dana White to somebody like Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, in terms of also, any of the other boxing promoters out, the way they talk about boxing and fighters and everything like that. There's a business side to them, but there's a human side. There's a care in terms of strategically putting in their fighter in with somebody else who they think because it's a business at the end of the day. They want their fighter to win, but it's got to be competitive as well. But they want their fighter to build them up. Zuffa Boxers don't care about that. Dana White don't care about that. Get in there, fight him, and if you win, you win. You lose, you lose. And especially when we got you under contract, where we're just going to pay you what we want to pay you, just like they do in the UFC. You either fight or you don't, and you're not going to get any money. And we're going to pay you 50 grand, 100 grand. That's what's coming for boxers. So if I was a guy, a fighter, a young guy, I would try and steer away from that. The allure of going to someone like Zufa, so, I'm going to get my payouts and everything like that. You won't. Long term, you'll. If money's all you're after, then don't shortchange yourself for just a few thousand here. You want to stay in boxing and stay in terms of doing the best you can, because if you're not that good, you're never going to earn that much money anyway. Whichever system you go to, and maybe boxing isn't for you. Whatever. But if you're quality enough, then regardless, whatever it is, and this is a main criticism for somebody like Conor Benn, who's gone over to Zufa, it's that you were going to earn millions with Matchroom anyway. The next successive fights, they were going to put you in strategically with different organisations, different fights, and you were going to get, because you're WBC number 1 anyway, contender. So, you're going to make millions. You've already made millions out of the last 2 fights against Chris Eubank Jr. So Conor Benn is talking bollocks about, this is my legacy and my children and all that sort of stuff. What a load of bollocks, because you've already earned this money. Don't believe him. Everything he's saying is a lie. Anything he says is a load of bollocks. Don't believe everything that, Matchroom are telling you and Eddie Hearn is saying. Of course, they're going to sugarcoat it a little bit. But the facts are the facts. They stuck with this Conor Benn. They stayed with him. They supported him. Financial reason, yes, but they stayed with him through thick and thin, where they could have just dropped him as soon as he failed the drug test, and then Conor Benn would be finished. He would never come back from it, right? Because it would be up to him. But Matchroom decided to stick with him, right? Back him. Zuffa Boxing wouldn't do that. Dana White wouldn't do that. Turkey Shake wouldn't do that. They couldn't give a two so. So, part of me is this: what you reap, what you sow. You've done this, Conor Benn. You've gone over to them. They're the ruthless ones. Yeah, right now they're going to pay you 15 million. But I tell you what, they don't. There is no incentive for them to make you a better fighter, to put you on a better path. The only path they're interested in is themselves. Zufa sucks here, Jevon. MX BBL Life. Zufa going to take over boxing simply because of the ring bout. All the top boxers who won the world titles want that ring bout in their collection. That alone is going to the big names. We'll have to see how this plays out. We'll have to see that. Yeah, there is that something. But at the end of the day, the way it's going, it really depends where the big fights are, where the money is, and everything like that. People fighters are not looking at the ring bout initially. They're looking at becoming world champion or becoming, area, national, whatever, national champion, European, American champion, an international champion, a world champion. That's what they're striving for. Then obviously when you get to that point, you want to be considered as a ring bout champion or ring number one. But essentially they've made that. They've devalued the ring by going in with a Zufa. So now you're saying, okay, because you're fighting on Zufa, we're going to have you as a ring number one. That doesn't make sense. All you're saying is whoever Zufa number one is ring number one. That devalues the whole thing. So ring is still going to be associated with all the other bouts in terms of looking at what every other fighter is doing, but they're also going to look at Zufa as well. And you're going to favour Zufa just because the Turkey Al Sheikh owns everything. I don't buy it. I don't think it's too vague. It's too messed up. As I say, I'm all for having one champion, one world champion, but the problem is with one world champion, it stifles everything. It doesn't get everything moving. We want to see boxing. Want to see, if I'm a football fan, I want to watch football matches, loads of football matches. If I'm an ice hockey fan, I want to watch loads of ice hockey games. I don't want to watch one or two games a year. I want to watch this time and time again. And I want to watch high value fights and entertaining fights and fights that mean a lot. And when you're challenging for a title, that's what it means. Now, what you could say is, right, okay, well, you've got your world champions at your bout level, but the ultimate world champion is what we already have, undisputed. So then, at that level, when you've got unifications or where you got undisputed, yeah, that is the guy, that is the girl. They are the undisputed. We've already got that. We've already got that one bout, as it were. That one fighter who is the best and has proven they're the best because they've beaten everybody in a way, right? Crawford, obviously, until he retired. But in a way, yeah, number one. He's the best fighter in the world. Crawford, best fighter. Usyk, best fighter, right? Everybody else, until they clean up the bounds, until they unify everything, they are world champions, whatever. But you can't say they're the absolute best. Just because you bring in Zufa means absolutely nothing. Because it's only for fighters who are in Zufa, they could say, they've already done it. They've already had world title fights, or they're going to have world title fight for Jaya Pattaya under Zufa, a Zufa world champion. It's a nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Yeah, Zufa taking over because they got Conor Benn. Well, and I definitely not saying that. I'm definitely not saying that. What I'm saying is that, yeah, you got to watch the whole show, because I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that they're trying to make moves like this. They're going against their original plan. Their plan is all over the place right now. They're coming out, and Dana White being his brash self is a load of bollocks, right? They're trying to get Conor Benn, likes of Conor Benn, trying to buy up talent. And it's just creating another bout, another organisation. That's it. I don't know what people are getting so, worked up about it. As I say, I hope Conor Benn gets chinned for it. I really does. I hope they fall flat on their face, because you might throw all this money at it, but essentially you got to look at whether a business is working or not. And it might work in the United States, but it won't work globally. I can't see it. Anyway, with that, I'll leave you to it. But, there's lots of stuff going on. But also, you got to take in the likes of Frank Warren now. Frank Warren, they're supposed to be going after Sella and Turkey Al Sheikh and Zuffa Boxing, I think. They're supposed to be suing them for $1 billion. Who knows what's going on behind there. But I'd say the relationships are breaking down. Now, they're saying, you know, on the face of it, the relationships aren't breaking down between Frank and Eddie and Turkey El Sheikh. But I would look, if you're not having all these big shows, you had all this, you know, you brought everybody together. Let's get the promoters working with each other. Let's, you know, have these big fights. And all of a sudden you stop it because you're going. Also, they said, okay, we had a contract. We're going to do all this stuff. We came over to DAZN, for example, because it was all going to be part of this big package. Now you're pulling the plug. You're taking it all over there. I'm not hardly surprised that, you know, they're going to try and sue them. You know, good luck with that, but I'm hardly surprised. But anyway, it's an interesting few days. It's going to be an interesting time to see what happens to Zuffa Boxing. I think it's a stupid name. You know, I don't rate Dana White at all as a human being. I don't rate him. That's just a preference. That's just my opinion. That's just a preference. You know, I don't know him. I can only judge a person by the way they act and the things that they say. He might be an absolutely lovely person in person. I just don't think he comes across very well, the things that he says. Now, many of you might think, well, he has to be like that. He's a ruthless person, and he's a business that is part of their business. I just don't like that business model. I just don't like that business. Now, if you voluntarily sign up to that business model in terms of a fighter, well, then, you know, you, in my opinion, you have nothing to complain about because you have voluntarily signed up to that business model. You know, you've signed up to deal with these kind of people, right? If you don't, then obviously if you don't sign up to that, well, then you have the right to say, actually, I don't like that business model. And that's the reason why I do it. I much prefer this business model, this sporting model, this way of doing things. And I'm not saying that the boxing world doesn't need restructuring, reorganizing. Absolutely it does, and needs lots of variation in it. But at the same time, you can't just say we want a one-bout system, or you say, and so well, who is that one-bout system? Where does it come from? Who's organizing it? Because to say if they were just going to have another promotional organization business, then all it is just one organization. It's another bout. That's all it is. The only way you could have done this in terms of it would have been for the organizations themselves, WBA, WBC, WBO, IBF, IBO, if you want to include them, right, is for them to have some kind of meeting or some kind of arrangement to say, when you've got, we'll have our own world champions, and then we will have a way to become undisputed every single time. They would act as a committee to supervise global professional boxing. That's the only way you could do it. Bright Boxer, you think the fights on Zufa were good and the production was good as well? I disagree. I didn't think they were. I think the fights are okay. I think some were good. I've already said that. I thought the production was rubbish. I thought it was absolutely rubbish. And I've got to say the BBC production of fights was pretty poor as well. The couple that they've had, the first one especially, was really rubbish. So they learned. You know, they could turn this around. They could get better to everybody's taste. But you know, you've got to look at the future, and all I'm seeing is that they're throwing money at creating another bout, another promotional company. That's it. We'll have to see how far they get, right? Have to see how far they get. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like what I do here, keep on watching, and I'll catch you again in another video coming very soon. But Zufa, who knows where this is going to go? But they're definitely systematically trying to take over. They're trying to build up, and it's for lots of different reasons. It's not just Dana White. It's Turkey El Sheikh. It's Saudi money, TKO, and they've got a lot of backing behind them. But I just don't think it's a good thing for boxing. I just don't see it being the best thing for boxing. It might be for some fighters, but I don't see this in terms of taking over. Just can't see it.